I am not running, I am dead. These words became the last spoken by the Grand Master of the Templars, Guillaume de Beaujeu, as he, mortally wounded, abandoned the walls of besieged Acre. But what if I told you that the Master harbored no illusions regarding this battle? It is time to cast aside the myth that the Templars were exclusively blind fanatics. The Order's final leader turned out to be a skilled diplomat. Fluent in Arabic, he spent 18 years desperately trying to prevent war by concluding truces with the sultans. Here is a man who witnessed with his own eyes where blind faith leads. Prepare to immerse yourself in the atmosphere of the most intense siege in the history of the Crusades. In this episode, we will break down how Guillaume de Beaujeu, a relative of St. Louis IX, personally witnessed the catastrophe at Mansurah and vowed never to repeat the mistakes of the fanatics. How 18 years of fragile peace, built by his efforts, were destroyed in a single night by drunk Italian pilgrims. We will show the chronicles of a 40-day hell. How the 60-year-old Guillaume personally led night sorties, attempting to burn hundreds of the Sultan's siege engines. And his tragic finale, his last words, which went down in history, "I am not running, I am dead." This is the story of a pragmatist trapped in a world of fanatics. He realized the city was doomed and the Sultan's army invincible. But the status of Templar Grand Master obliged him to fall defending something that perhaps he himself no longer fully believed in. We saw how Baybars, the hammer, began this destruction. Now we will see how his son completes what was started. This is the story of the final 40 days. This is the story of the fall of Acre. This is the story of Guillaume de Beaujeu, the last defender. To understand why the last Grand Master of the Templars chose the path of diplomacy rather than fanaticism, we must go back 40 years. The year is 1250, Egypt, the catastrophe at Mansurah. Among the knights who watched in horror as the army of St. Louis IX rotted alive from dysentery was a young French aristocrat, Guillaume de Beaujeu. His standing went beyond that of ordinary knighthood. He was a relative of King Louis himself. The young man belonged to that very elite which had gone on this crusade driven by pure faith. And what did he see? Before his eyes, the king's brother, Robert of Artois, driven by vanity, fell into a trap set by the warrior-slave Baybars. He watched as God's anointed, his monarch, sick and humiliated, ended up a prisoner of the Mamluks. This is how Guillaume realized what results from blind faith detached from reality. This catastrophe, this shadow of Mansurah, would haunt him his entire life. It became his primary trauma. Upon joining the Order of the Templars, he rejected the fanaticism of Pelagius, preferring pragmatism instead. Studying the enemy thoroughly, the master even mastered the Arabic language. Guillaume realized that the Mamluks were not savages, but a ruthlessly precise military machine. In 1273, when he is elected Grand Master of the Order, his goal is no longer to reconquer Jerusalem. He considered such dreams madness. His goal is to survive, to hold Acre at any cost. And he knows that the only way to survive a war against Baybars is not to fight him. Guillaume de Beaujeu is the Grand Master and the living embodiment of the peace party. He is accused of cowardice. He is hated by the Venetians and Genoese, who thirst for war. But the head of the order does not care. He is the only one who understands the reality. Personally conducting negotiations, he secures a truce. Sultan Baybars, the hammer, respects him as an equal. After Baybar's death in 1277, Guillaume manages to conclude a new 10-year truce with the new Sultan, Qalawun. 10 years of peace. For Acre, this last stronghold, that span seemed like an eternity. Guillaume de Beaujeu was masterfully buying time. He remained the only sane leader, desperately trying to maintain a fragile peace, knowing that a single spark and everything would collapse. And in 1290, that spark ignited. For 17 years, Guillaume de Beaujeu walked a knife's edge, maintaining the peace. But all this stability was trampled by stupidity. August 1290. Another ship arrives in Acre, carrying pilgrims from Italy. But this is not an army. This is a mob of fanatics, drunkards and vagabonds who took the cross to escape debt or justice. The city of Acre, thanks to 17 years of peace, had become a thriving metropolis. Thousands of Muslims lived and traded within it under the protection of the truce. The Italian Crusaders, drunk and enraged at seeing infidels in the holy city, incite a riot. They spill into the streets and begin a massacre. Anyone sporting a beard or appearing foreign to them was subjected to extermination. Muslim merchants and local Syrian Christians fell under the blow. News of this reaches Sultan Qalawun. He is furious. This is not just murder, but a direct violation of oath. His subjects were killed while under the personal guarantee of peace from the Templars and Hospitallers. He immediately dispatches envoys. His demand was just and simple. Hand over the murderers. Justice must be served. The master is horrified. He understands that this is the end. He begs the High Court of Acre to agree. Hand over these bandits, he says, or we will all perish. But the council, blinded by pride and the pressure of wealthy Italian communes who did not want to hand over their own, refuses. Not a single man was surrendered to the Sultan. For Qalawun, this was a declaration of war. The truce was broken, and it was Acre that broke it. Sultan Qalawun, the victorious, successor to Baybar's, issues an order. He declares jihad against the Crusaders' last stronghold. The gathering begins not just of an army, but of a colossal armada. From all over Egypt and Syria, he pulls together engineers, sappers, and siege engines. He orders the transport of giant catapults that his father Baybar's had used in castle sieges. Guillaume de Beaujeu in Acre sees this. His spies report to him. He desperately sends letters to Europe. Help! The end of the world awaits us. And then, in November 1290, a miracle happens. Sultan Qalawun, standing at the head of his assembled army, ready for the march, suddenly falls ill and dies. In Acre, there is jubilation. People are certain that God has saved them and the storm has passed. They did not know one thing. Qalawun's son, Al-Ashraf Khalil, was even more ruthless. He inherited not only the throne from his father, but also an oath. Legend has it that Al-Ashraf Khalil entered his dead father's tent, placed his hand on the body, and swore that he would not enter his own tomb until he wiped Acre off the face of the earth. In April 1921, Guillaume de Beaujeu ascended the wall of Acre, and what he saw on the horizon silenced him. It was a forest of siege engines. There were, according to rumors, several hundred of them. Diplomacy was over. April 5th, 1291. The siege of Acre has begun. Guillaume de Beaujeu, the 60-year-old diplomat, stood on the wall and looked upon something the Holy Land had never seen before. Against the city marched not merely an army, but a colossal machine of destruction. Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil brought, by estimates, more than 160,000 men. But it wasn't about the men. It was about the siege engines. Chroniclers write that he had hundreds of them. Among them were 4 giant trebuchets, so large that each had its own name. 2 of the weapons were named the Furious and the Victorious. This was not an assault. It was an industrial demolition of the city. What did Guillaume have? At his disposal were 14,000 infantrymen and perhaps 800 knights, Templars, Hospitallers, and the garrison. Caught in a trap, he clearly realized the situation. For the first few weeks, he desperately tried to do what he knew best: negotiate. He sent envoys to the Sultan. But al-Ashraf Khalil was not his father. He was not Baibars, who respected Guillaume. The young and arrogant ruler thirsted for glory. He received the envoys and, according to legend, simply pointed to his camp, which stretched to the horizon, and said, "Tell your master that I will be merciful. I will spare his life if he gives me the keys to the city. Now get out." For Guillaume de Beaujeu, this was the end. The diplomat in him died. He was forced to become a warrior. He realized that the only chance was audacity. He had to destroy those giant catapults that were turning the city walls into dust around the clock. So Guillaume de Beaujeu switches from diplomacy to sabotage. He begins a series of desperate night sorties. Gathering the order's best fighters, under the cover of darkness, they exit the gates, trying to break through to the siege engines and burn them. But Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil was ready for this. Every sortie ran into a dense wall of Mamluk cavalry. The Templars couldn't even get close to the trebuchets. They suffered heavy losses and returned with nothing. Meanwhile, the Furious and the Victorious were working day and night. Their main target was one tower, the most powerful tower on the entire wall, the corner tower defended by the king's knights. It ironically was called the Cursed Tower. Mamluk sappers, shielding themselves from a hail of stones, dug tunnels beneath it. Guillaume de Beaujeu understood. If this tower falls, the wall collapses, and the city will be doomed. Early May 1291. The siege of Acre turns into a living hell. Hundreds of Sultan Khalil's siege engines maintain a continuous bombardment. They have turned the outer walls into stone rubble. But the Cursed Tower, the main corner bastion, still holds. Guillaume de Beaujeu fights like a rank-and-file knight. By day he is on the walls, directing the defense. By night he leads sorties, trying to burn the siege engines. But the efforts are futile. Mamluk sappers, working under the cover of shields and continuous archer fire, did their job. They dug giant tunnels under the tower and packed them with combustibles. On May 4th, seeing that the tower is doomed, Guillaume orders the garrison to retreat from it. On May 15th, the Mamluks set fire to the supports. The wall crumbles. The massive Cursed Tower settles, opening a giant breach in the city's outer defense. But the Mamluks storming the breach fall into a trap. The Templars and Hospitallers meet them at the second, inner wall. A desperate slaughter begins in the narrow space between the two walls. The next day, May 16th, Sultan Khalil throws thousands of soldiers into the breach. And at that moment, Guillaume de Beaujeu and the Grand Master of the Hospitallers personally lead the counterattack. They push the Mamluks back. They retake the breach. This was the Crusaders' last victory, a victory that decided nothing. In this battle, the Grand Master of the Hospitallers was mortally wounded, and Guillaume de Beaujeu received a severe wound to the shoulder. He retreated to the Templar citadel to bind his wounds. He knew this was the death throes. The Sultan was regrouping. The night of May 17, 1291. Silence in Acre. But this is not the silence of peace. This is the silence before death. Guillaume de Beaujeu, wounded, sits in his citadel. He knows what will happen tomorrow. Sultan Khalil is preparing the final assault. Almost no defenders remain. The walls have collapsed. Women and children are panic-loading onto the last Venetian ships, trying to save themselves. The sea is stormy. Ships are sinking right in the harbor, dragging hundreds of people to the bottom. The city is doomed. The diplomat Guillaume de Beaujeu has lost. But the Templar Grand Master Guillaume de Beaujeu could not lose. He knew that his order was created to protect the Holy Land. And here it is, the last inch of this land. He had to die on it. Early in the morning on May 18, 1291, the 60-year-old wounded master put on his armor for the last time. Under the deafening roar of Mamluk drums, he led his knights to the main breach, to the gate of St. Anthony. May 18, 1291. Dawn. Under the deafening roar of thousands of drums and trumpets, Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil gives the order. Tens of thousands of Mamluks throw themselves at the ruins of the cursed tower and the breach at the gate of St. Anthony. The decisive assault has begun. The wounded master stands at the head of his warriors. Beside him is a handful of Hospitallers. They are the last line of defense. The massacre begins. Mamluks climb over the debris, their waves endless. Guillaume fights in the front ranks, his sword against hundreds. He was a diplomat who avoided this moment for 18 years, but now he is simply a knight dying for his duty. Before his eyes, brothers of the order fall under blows, and the enemy irresistibly bursts into the city. He knows it is all over. In the midst of this chaos, he suddenly freezes. He was not struck down in fair combat. He did not fall under a hail of blows. He simply stops. He drops his sword and slowly, staggering, turns his back to the battle and walks toward the citadel. His knights, seeing this, fall into despair. Their leader is fleeing. One of them screams in horror after him, "Monseigneur! Monseigneur! Are you fleeing?" Guillaume de Beaujeu stops and turns to his knight. Raising his arm, he points to the wound under his armpit. An arrow had pierced a spot unprotected by armor. And he utters his final words, which will go down in history forever. "Je ne m'enfuis pas, je suis mort." I am not running, I am dead. He falls to the ground. His knights carry him from the battlefield. A few hours later, the Grand Master of the Templars, Guillaume de Beaujeu, dies. The death of the master sealed Acre's fate. As soon as the news that the Templar leader had fallen spread through the city, the defense collapsed. Panic set in. Slaughter. The city, which was the last capital of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, was burned to the ground. Thus ended the drama of a man of reason. Guillaume de Beaujeu was not a fanatic. He was a man who had personally seen Saint Louis's catastrophe at Mansurah. The Grand Master knew that the Mamluks were invincible and that war with them was suicide. He spent 18 years of his life trying to prevent this day, but his world was destroyed by drunken fanatics he did not control. And he, the pragmatist, was forced to don armor and die as a martyr for a cause he perhaps no longer believed in. Guillaume de Beaujeu appeared to the world neither as a saint nor an avenger, but as the last defender who tried to negotiate while others thirsted for blood. Guillaume was the last defender. And in the next, final episode of our cycle, we will tell the story of the man who delivered the final blow. We will see this siege through the eyes of the victor. This will be the story of Al-Ashraf Khalil, the finisher. If you enjoyed this story about the last breath of the Crusades, please support us with a like and subscribe to the channel. Write in the comments, if the Council of Acre had handed over the murderers, could Guillaume have saved the city?